The morning sun painted Westminster Abbey in golden light as thousands of people lined the streets of London. Emma Thompson, a schoolteacher from Manchester, had been standing behind the barriers since 4 in the morning. Her hands gripped a small Union Jack flag, and her heart raced with excitement she had never felt before. "I can't believe this is really happening," she whispered to her sister Sarah, who stood beside her with tears already forming in her eyes. The crowd stretched for miles in every direction. Families had traveled from across the United Kingdom and around the world to witness this historic moment. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders, elderly couples held hands tightly, and strangers became friends as they shared the anticipation that filled the air. Mrs. Margaret White, an 89-year-old grandmother from Scotland, clutched her walking stick with one hand and dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. She remembered watching Queen Elizabeth's coronation on a tiny black-and-white television in 1953 when she was just a young woman. Now, 70 years later, she was witnessing another royal coronation with her own eyes. "My dear William," she murmured softly, "how proud your grandmother would be." The sound of horses' hooves on cobblestone began to echo through the streets. A hush fell over the massive crowd as the Golden State coach appeared in the distance, pulled by 8 magnificent gray horses. The coach gleamed in the morning sunlight, its golden decorations catching every ray of light like precious jewels. Inside the carriage, Prince William sat tall and composed, wearing his ceremonial red uniform with gold braiding. His face showed the weight of responsibility he was about to accept, but also a quiet confidence that reassured everyone watching. Beside him, Catherine looked absolutely radiant in an ivory silk gown that seemed to flow like liquid moonlight. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, crowned with a delicate diamond tiara that had belonged to Queen Mary. As the carriage moved slowly through the crowds, something magical began to happen. People who had been chatting and laughing suddenly fell silent. The only sounds were the gentle clip-clop of the horses and the soft rustling of thousands of flags waving in the breeze. Young Tommy Watson, only 7 years old, stood on his tiptoes, trying to get a better view. When the carriage passed directly in front of him, William caught sight of the boy's excited face pressed against the barrier. The future king smiled warmly and gave a small wave. Tommy's face lit up with pure joy, and he would remember that moment for the rest of his life. Catherine noticed an elderly veteran in a wheelchair, his chest covered with medals from decades of service. She placed her hand over her heart and nodded respectfully in his direction. The old soldier straightened his shoulders and saluted with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Look at her," whispered Maria Santos, a nurse from Spain who had saved for 2 years to make this trip. "She's not just wearing a crown. She's carrying the hopes and dreams of millions of people." The carriage continued its journey toward Westminster Abbey, but what was happening in the crowd was unlike anything anyone had expected. People weren't just watching a royal procession. They were experiencing something deeper, something that touched their hearts in ways they couldn't explain. Father Michael O'Brien, a Catholic priest from Ireland, found himself overwhelmed with emotion. He had served his community for 30 years, conducting weddings, baptisms, and funerals. He understood the power of ceremony and tradition. But this was different. This felt like witnessing history being written in real time. "There's something sacred about this moment," he said to the woman standing next to him. "These 2 people are about to dedicate their entire lives to serving others. That's not just duty, that's love made visible." As the golden carriage drew closer to Westminster Abbey, the crowd's emotions intensified. Some people were crying openly, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of pride and connection to something greater than themselves. Jennifer Lee, a young mother holding her infant daughter, looked down at her baby's sleeping face. "One day, little one, you'll ask me about this moment. I'll tell you about the day when hope and tradition came together, and how the whole world stopped to witness something beautiful. The horses slowed as they approached the Abbey's ancient doors. Inside the carriage, William reached over and gently squeezed Catherine's hand. No words were needed. They both understood that their lives were about to change forever, and that they would face whatever came next together. The crowd's silence was broken by a single voice. An elderly woman began singing, "God Save the King," in a clear, beautiful voice. Slowly, thousands of other voices joined in, creating a chorus that seemed to rise up to the heavens themselves. The song wasn't just about loyalty to the crown. It was about hope for the future, respect for the past, and love for the people who were about to pledge their lives to service. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she listened to the voices of her future subjects singing with such passion and devotion. She had always known this day would come, but nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming love and support radiating from the crowd. William straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. In just a few minutes, he would walk through those abbey doors as a prince. When he emerged, he would be a king. But right now, in this carriage, listening to the voices of his people, he felt the full weight and wonder of what that truly meant. The Golden State coach came to a gentle stop in front of Westminster Abbey. The horses stamped their feet softly, and the ornate carriage rocked slightly as William and Catherine prepared to step out and walk toward their destiny. In the crowd, Emma Thompson gripped her flag tighter and whispered a prayer for the couple who were about to change the course of history. She didn't know it yet, but this moment would stay with her forever, a reminder that sometimes the world stops turning to witness something truly extraordinary. The Abbey doors stood open, waiting. Inside, generations of kings and queens had been crowned in the same sacred space. Now it was William and Catherine's turn to add their chapter to the endless story of the British monarchy. The crowd held its breath, knowing they were about to witness something that their children and grandchildren would read about in history books. But for now, in this perfect moment, it wasn't history. It was real life, unfolding before their eyes like a dream come true. The massive oak doors of Westminster Abbey creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo through centuries of British history. Archbishop of Canterbury stood waiting in his ceremonial robes, his face serene, but his eyes bright with the significance of what was about to unfold. Behind him, the ancient abbey stretched into shadows and light, filled with the most important people from around the world. William stepped down from the golden carriage first, his polished boots touching the red carpet that had been rolled out like a river of crimson silk. He turned and extended his hand to Catherine, helping her down with the gentle care of a devoted husband rather than the formal protocol of a royal prince. Catherine's ivory gown flowed around her like liquid starlight as her feet found the ground. The delicate beading on her dress caught the morning light, creating tiny sparkles that danced with every movement. She looked up at the towering spires of Westminster Abbey, the same church where she had married William 13 years earlier. Today felt like both a continuation of that joyful day and the beginning of something entirely new. The crowd that had been singing moments before fell into complete silence. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Everyone seemed to understand that they were witnessing something sacred, something that connected them to 1,000 years of British tradition and countless generations who had come before. Inside the Abbey, Queen Camilla sat in the front pew, wearing a midnight blue dress with pearls that had belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her eyes never left her stepson as he prepared to take the most important walk of his life. Beside her, other members of the royal family watched with expressions of pride mixed with the weight of understanding what this moment truly meant. Prime ministers and presidents from around the world filled the ancient pews, leaders who commanded armies and governed nations, sat quietly, united in respect for the ceremony about to unfold. But this wasn't about political power. This was about something deeper, something that transcended borders and connected all humanity to the idea of service, sacrifice, and responsibility. Outside, the crowd pressed closer to the barriers, though security personnel gently reminded them to stay back. Nobody wanted to miss a single second of William and Catherine's walk into the Abbey. Mobile phones appeared as people tried to capture the moment, but many quickly put them away, realizing that some experiences are too precious to view through a screen. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a historian from Oxford University, stood among the crowd with tears running down her cheeks. She had spent her entire career studying British royal history, but nothing in her books had prepared her for the emotional power of witnessing a coronation in person. "This isn't just about one man becoming king," she explained to her teenage daughter who stood beside her. "This is about the continuation of something that has held our nation together through wars, plagues, celebrations, and sorrows. It's about the promise that no matter what happens, there will always be someone who puts the needs of the people before their own desires." William and Catherine began their slow, measured walk up the steps of Westminster Abbey. Each step was deliberate, carrying them closer to a moment that would change not just their lives, but the entire trajectory of the British monarchy. William's face showed quiet determination mixed with humility. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life, yet nothing could have truly prepared him for the overwhelming responsibility he was about to accept. Catherine walked beside him with grace that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul. She had never been born to this role, but she had grown into it with a dignity and strength that impressed everyone who watched her. Her transformation from a middle-class girl from Berkshire to a future queen consort had been remarkable, but it was her genuine care for people that made her truly special. As they climbed the Abbey steps, fragments of conversation drifted from the crowd. "Look how calm they are," whispered one woman. "I pray God gives them strength for what they're about to face," murmured an elderly man. "My grandmother would have loved to see this day," said a middle-aged teacher, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The Abbey's ancient stones seemed to absorb the weight of the moment. These walls had witnessed the coronation of 38 monarchs over nearly 1,000 years. Kings and queens had walked these same steps through triumph and tragedy, war and peace, joy and sorrow. Each coronation had been unique, but all had shared the same fundamental promise: a life dedicated to serving others above oneself. Inside the Abbey, the congregation rose to their feet as William and Catherine appeared in the doorway. The moment felt electric, as if the very air was charged with the significance of what was happening. Cameras flashed, but the sound was muffled by the ancient stone walls and the hushed breathing of hundreds of people trying to absorb every detail of this historic moment. Catherine's hand found William's arm as they paused in the doorway, both taking a moment to look down the long aisle toward the altar where Archbishop of Canterbury waited with the crown jewels displayed on golden cushions. The St. Edward's crown sat in a place of honor, its purple velvet and gold gleaming under the Abbey's ancient lights. "Are you ready?" William asked quietly, his voice carrying just enough for Catherine to hear. She looked up at him with a smile that held both love and courage. "With you? I'm ready for anything." They began their procession down the aisle as the Abbey's magnificent organ began to play. The music filled every corner of the sacred space, rising up to the soaring Gothic arches and washing over everyone present like a wave of pure emotion. The hymn chosen for their entrance was "I Was Glad," the same piece that had been played at the coronation of William's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, 70 years earlier. Each step down the aisle carried them deeper into their destiny. William nodded respectfully to the foreign dignitaries and heads of state as they passed. Catherine's eyes found familiar faces in the crowd. Friends from their university days, staff members who had served their family for years, and ordinary citizens who had been chosen to represent the millions of people who couldn't be inside the abbey but were watching with just as much love and respect. Halfway down the aisle, William spotted his former teacher from Eton College, now elderly but still proud to witness his student's greatest moment. Catherine saw her parents sitting with expressions of wonder, mixed with the kind of pride that only parents can feel when watching their child achieve something extraordinary. The altar grew closer with each step, and the weight of tradition seemed to intensify. Every monarch who had been crowned in this abbey had walked this same path, feeling the same mixture of humility and determination that William and Catherine felt now. The crown awaiting William represented not just power and privilege, but an unbreakable commitment to put the welfare of his people above his own comfort and desires. As they reached the front of the abbey, Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward with a warm smile that managed to be both formal and deeply personal. He had known William since childhood, had performed his marriage to Catherine, and had baptized their children. Now he would crown William king in the most sacred ceremony of the British monarchy. "Your Royal Highnesses," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of the abbey, "welcome to this place of ancient worship and royal tradition. You come here not to receive glory for yourselves, but to accept the sacred duty of service to God and to your people." William and Catherine knelt together at the altar as the congregation watched in complete silence. Outside, the crowd had grown so quiet that even the sound of pigeons in the nearby trees seemed loud. Everyone, whether inside the abbey or standing on the streets of London, understood that they were witnessing something that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. The ceremony was about to begin, but already the emotional impact was overwhelming. This wasn't just about crowning a new king. This was about hope, tradition, love, and the eternal human desire to be part of something greater than ourselves. The ancient ceremony began with words that had been spoken in Westminster Abbey for over 1,000 years. Archbishop of Canterbury's voice carried across the silent congregation as he asked the question that would change everything. "Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the people of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and your other realms and territories, according to their respective laws and customs?" William's voice was clear and strong as he replied, "I solemnly promise so to do." In that moment, something shifted in the abbey. The weight of his words seemed to settle over everyone present like a warm blanket of responsibility and hope. Outside, millions of people watching on television screens around the world held their breath, feeling as if they were part of something much larger than themselves. Catherine knelt beside William, her ivory gown spread around her like the petals of a perfect flower. Her role in this ceremony was different, but equally important. She would not be crowned queen today. That title would come naturally when William became king, but she was making her own sacred promises about the life of service she was choosing to embrace. The congregation included faces that told the story of modern Britain. There was Amara Okafor, a young doctor from Birmingham whose parents had immigrated from Nigeria 30 years earlier. She had been selected to represent the National Health Service, and tears streamed down her face as she realized she was witnessing the coronation of the man who would one day be her king. Beside her sat James MacLeod, a Scottish fisherman whose family had lived on the same remote island for 12 generations. Despite their different backgrounds, both felt the same overwhelming sense of pride and connection to this moment. Archbishop of Canterbury lifted the golden ampulla, an ancient vessel shaped like an eagle that had been used in royal coronations for centuries. The holy oil inside had been blessed specifically for this ceremony. As he anointed William's hands, head, and chest with the sacred oil, the abbey fell into the deepest silence anyone could remember. "Be thy hands anointed with holy oil," the archbishop intoned, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "Be thy head anointed with holy oil, be thy breast anointed with holy oil, as kings, priests, and prophets were anointed." This was the most sacred part of the entire ceremony, so holy that a golden canopy was held over William to shield this moment from view. Even the television cameras turned away, respecting the privacy of this ancient ritual. In the crowd outside, people instinctively lowered their voices to whispers, somehow understanding that something profoundly spiritual was taking place inside the abbey. Catherine watched her husband with eyes full of love and admiration. She had known this moment would come from the day they became engaged, but seeing it happen filled her with emotions she couldn't have imagined. This was the man who helped their children with homework, who made her laugh during quiet evenings at home, who worried about ordinary things like any other husband and father. Now he was being transformed into something greater, accepting a burden that would last for the rest of his life. The golden canopy was removed, and Archbishop of Canterbury reached for St. Edward's crown. The ancient crown, made of solid gold and weighing nearly 5 pounds, had crowned English monarchs for over 350 years. As the archbishop lifted it high above William's head, the entire abbey seemed to hold its breath. "God crown you with a crown of glory and righteousness," he declared, his voice rising with the magnitude of the moment. The crown settled onto William's head, and in that instant, he was no longer Prince William. He was King William V, monarch of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms, defender of the faith, and servant of millions of people around the world. The transformation was visible immediately. Something in William's posture changed, as if the weight of the crown had awakened something deep within his soul. His eyes, when he looked up at the congregation, held a new depth of understanding and responsibility. The abbey erupted in the most magnificent sound as the organ played "God Save the King," and every voice in the building joined together in song. Outside, the crowds took up the anthem, and the sound rolled across London like thunder. Church bells began ringing all across the city, joined by bells in every corner of the United Kingdom and throughout the Commonwealth. Catherine felt her heart swell with pride and love as she looked at her husband, her king. The man she had fallen in love with at university was still there, but he had grown into something magnificent. She knew the sacrifices this crown would demand from both of them, but she also knew they would face whatever came together. The ceremony continued with the presentation of the royal regalia. The sovereign's orb was placed in William's right hand, symbolizing his role as defender of the faith and protector of his people. The scepter was placed in his left hand, representing his authority to govern with justice and mercy. Each item carried centuries of meaning, connecting him to every monarch who had come before. As William held the symbols of his new authority, his eyes found Catherine's face in the crowd. Their silent exchange spoke volumes about the partnership they had built and the challenges they would face together. She smiled at him with a mixture of pride, love, and unwavering support that gave him strength for the enormous responsibility he had just accepted. The archbishop turned to address the congregation, and through them, the entire world. "I here present unto you King William, your undoubted king. Wherefore all you who are come this day to do your homage, are you willing to do the same?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. "God save King William," echoed through the abbey with such force that the ancient stones seemed to vibrate with the sound. Outside, the crowd took up the cry, and it spread through the streets of London like wildfire. In that moment, something magical happened. The formal ceremony transformed into something deeply human and emotional. This wasn't just about crowning another king. This was about hope for the future, respect for tradition, and the universal human need to believe that someone cares enough to dedicate their entire life to serving others. Mrs. Elizabeth Harper, a retired teacher from Wales who had taught for 40 years, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched from the Abbey. "In all my years of teaching history," she whispered to her daughter, "I never imagined I would witness something this beautiful. This young man isn't just accepting a crown. He's promising to spend every day of his life trying to make the world a better place." As the ceremony drew to a close, William and Catherine prepared for their triumphant journey back through London. The newly crowned king took his wife's hand, and together they began the long walk back down the Abbey aisle. But now everything was different. William wore the crown that made him king, and Catherine walked beside him as his queen consort, ready to support him in the incredible journey ahead. The crowds outside had grown even larger during the ceremony. People had been arriving throughout the morning, drawn by something they couldn't quite explain, but felt deeply in their hearts. As William and Catherine emerged from Westminster Abbey, the roar of celebration was unlike anything London had ever heard. The Golden State coach waited for them, but this time their journey would be different. They were no longer the Prince and Princess of Wales riding to their coronation. They were King William V and Queen Catherine, beginning their reign with the love and support of their people surrounding them like a protective embrace. As they settled into the carriage for their return journey, William looked down at the crown in his hands. He would wear a lighter crown for the procession back to Buckingham Palace, and then at his wife's radiant face. "We did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with wonder. "No," Catherine replied, her eyes bright with love and determination. "We're just beginning." The carriage began to move, carrying them toward their new life as monarchs. Behind them, Westminster Abbey stood as it had for centuries, having witnessed another chapter in the endless story of the British crown. Ahead lay a future full of challenges and opportunities, but also the unwavering support of people who believed in the power of service, tradition, and love. The coronation was over, but the reign of King William V and Queen Catherine had only just begun. And somewhere in the cheering crowds, in the ringing bells, and in the tears of joy on countless faces, the magic of this day would live forever in the hearts of all who witnessed it.